They wagered he would cry before dessert. In a glass-walled conference room veiled by winter fog, the young billionaire smirked as he scrawled another figure onto the betting slip. A poor single father, invited to the city's most lavish gala purely for entertainment. A social experiment. A punchline waiting to happen. They didn't know he stood just outside the door, hearing every mocking word, every cruel laugh, every casual dismissal of his worth as a human being. 3 days later, through falling snow that blanketed the night in silence, he stepped from a black car onto the ice-covered red carpet. Photographers' flashes turning snowflakes into temporary stars. And in that frozen moment, when he walked through doors that weren't meant for him, the entire ballroom froze, not from the cold. The 43rd floor of Hale Tower caught the late afternoon sun in fractured angles. Daniel Frost stood in the executive corridor, digital tablet tucked under one arm, waiting for Victor Hale to finish whatever meeting had run 20 minutes past schedule. The voices reached him before he understood their meaning. Entire purpose is to see how long he lasts. Victor's voice carried through the gap where the conference room door hadn't quite latched. I give him 30 minutes before he realizes he doesn't belong. Laughter rippled through the room. Daniel's hand, reaching for the door handle, stopped mid-air. The Aurora Foundation Winter Gala? It's social observation, Victor replied. Brandon, you're in for 500? Make it 1,000. Oh, he'll show. That was Marcus Webb, Victor's college roommate. These people always show. Then they spend the whole night at the buffet table, sweating through a rental tux. Through the narrow gap in the door, Daniel watched Victor lean back in his chair. At 29, Victor Hale had inherited his father's empire and doubled it. The financial press called him brilliant. Daniel Frost, Victor said, testing the name's weight. Single father, works in operations coordination, lives in South Side somewhere, one of those apartment complexes where the heat doesn't quite reach the top floors. How do you even know him? The woman asked. He runs supply chain logistics for our building maintenance contracts. Competent enough. The kind of man you don't notice until something breaks. Victor swirled whatever was in his glass, saw him in the parking garage, picking up his daughter, told him about the gala invitation right there. His face like I'd handed him a lottery ticket. Daniel's jaw tightened. He remembered that conversation, remembered how carefully he'd folded the invitation, how Lily had asked if it meant Daddy was important now. The bet's simple, Victor continued. We each pick a timestamp. Whoever's closest to when he leaves wins the pot. 2,000 says he makes it to dinner, Marcus said. Just for the free meal. More laughter. Daniel felt something cold settle in his chest. His phone buzzed a text from the daycare. Lily's pickup time in 15 minutes. The smart choice was to leave. Delete the gala from his calendar. Continue the careful routine that kept him and Lily afloat. Safe, predictable, small. But when had small ever been enough? Daniel pulled up the gala invitation on his phone. Black tie, 8 o'clock. He tapped reply. Attending. Thank you for the invitation. Behind him, through the conference room door, someone was already counting their winnings. The apartment building on South Racine Avenue had stopped being charming somewhere around 1,987. Now it was simply old radiators that clanked, windows that let in cold air, hallways that smelled like other people's dinners. Home. Daniel carried Lily up the stairs, her backpack bouncing against his hip. She'd fallen asleep in the car. 7 years old and still light enough to carry, though his back reminded him that wouldn't last. Inside apartment 4C, he laid her on the sofa. The space was small living room, kitchenette, 1 bedroom, bathroom. But it was clean. That had been his first promise after Marie left. Whatever else failed, they'd have clean. He started dinner while Lily slept. Chicken breast, rice, frozen vegetables. The kitchen window overlooked the courtyard, where snow had turned the struggling grass into something almost picturesque. Daddy? Lily's voice, thick with sleep. Hey, sweetheart. Dinner in 10 minutes. She shuffled to the kitchen table, dragging the blanket. Mrs. Chen said, You picked me up on time today. That's 4 days in a row. Something in Daniel's chest pulled tight. 4 days. She was keeping track. New schedule at work. Should be able to keep it up. Is it, 'cause I told you I didn't like the after care? The extended program. It's because I like seeing you, Daniel said, setting plates on the table. Tell me about school. She did, a meandering story about art class and hamsters. Daniel listened, watched her face animate in the warm lamplight. This moment was everything. After dinner, after homework and teeth brushing, they sat together on the couch. The radiator clanked. Outside, snow had started again. Daddy? Lily leaned against his arm. Are you an important person? The question came from nowhere, landed everywhere. What makes you ask that? Tyler's dad has an office with his name on the door. Amy's mom is a doctor. Mrs. Chen says everyone's important in their own way, but I think she means some people are more important. She looked up at him. Are you? Daniel thought about the conference room, the wager, the laughter. I'm important to you. That's the only important that matters to me. But do other people think you're important? He could lie. But Lily had a radar for dishonesty. I think most people don't notice me at all. I do my job. I take care of you. That's enough. But what if you wanted them to notice? Daniel pulled her closer. Through the window, snow continued its work. Then I'd have to do something worth noticing. Lily nodded, satisfied. Within minutes, her breathing deepened into sleep. Daniel didn't move. His daughter, warm and safe. The radiator's rhythm, snow turning the courtyard into temporary magic. His phone sat on the coffee table, the gala invitation glowing. 3 days. He'd need to find something to wear, research the foundation. The smart choice was still to cancel, to stay where life was hard but known. But Lily's question circled back. What if you wanted them to notice? Not for him, but for her, so she'd stop counting consecutive pickup days like lottery wins. So she'd never wonder if her father was the kind of man who ran from challenges. The gala was in 3 days. Daniel reached for his phone and started making a list. You're actually going. Robert Frost didn't ask it as a question. Daniel's father stood in the apartment doorway Saturday morning, stamping snow off his boots. At 68, Robert still moved like the construction foreman he'd been for 40 years. Shoulders squared, handshake that meant business, eyes that missed nothing. You think I shouldn't? Daniel handed him coffee. Black, the way Robert had drunk it since before Daniel was born. I think Robert settled into the kitchen chair that creaked under anyone over 150 that I raised you to know when you're being set up. I know exactly what this is, and you're going anyway. Daniel leaned against the counter. Outside, Lily was building a snowman in the courtyard with the Korean family from 2B, her laughter carrying through the old glass. You remember when I was 12, that kid Marcus Webb invited me to his birthday party. Robert's mouth tightened. He remembered. Rich kid, new subdivision, indoor pool. You drove me there, helped me carry the present we'd wrapped in newspaper comics because we didn't have real wrapping paper. Daniel studied his coffee. His parents answered the door, took one look at us, and I watched them realize the invitation was a mistake. Some school fundraiser requirement gone wrong. They let you in anyway, because you stood there and waited until they did. Daniel met his father's eyes. You didn't leave, didn't let them make me leave. Just stood on that porch in your work boots with concrete dust still in your hair, and stared them down until they had no choice but to acknowledge I was a real person who deserved basic courtesy. That party was awful, Robert said quietly. It was terrible. I spent 3 hours in a corner while kids splashed in the pool I wasn't allowed to use because I didn't bring swim trunks. But I didn't run. I didn't cry. I stayed until you came back to pick me up, and I walked out that door with my head up. Daniel set down his mug. You taught me that. That was different. You were a child, and now I'm a father. Lily's already learning that the world divides people into important and everyone else. She asked me if I was important. What do you want me to tell her? Robert was quiet for a long moment, his weathered hands wrapped around the coffee mug. Your mother used to say you had more pride than common sense. She wasn't wrong. This gala, these people aren't going to suddenly respect you because you show up in a borrowed suit. I don't need their respect, Daniel said. I need to show Lily that her father doesn't hide. That when someone tries to make you the punchline, you show up anyway. Not because you'll change their minds, but because you refuse to accept their definition of who you are. Robert studied him for a long time. Then, slowly, he nodded. You'll need a decent suit. I have a plan for that. And transportation. You're not showing up in your Civic with the dented bumper. Working on it. And you need to know that they're going to try to humiliate you. Robert's voice was steady, firm. Not just ignore you actively, make you uncomfortable. Can you handle that without losing your temper? Daniel thought about Victor's laughter, Marcus's casual cruelty, the woman's sharp amusement. He thought about every time someone had looked through him instead of at him. Every moment he'd been invisible, or worse, visible only as something to pity or mock. I can handle it, he said. Good. Robert stood, clapped a hand on Daniel's shoulder. Then let's make sure you walk in there looking like you belong. Through the window, Lily's snowman was taking shape. She'd given it a smile made from small stones, arms raised in permanent celebration. Marco Alvarez's tailor shop occupied a narrow storefront on West 18th Street, squeezed between a laundromat and a panaderia. The sign had faded years ago, but everyone in the neighborhood knew Marco. 40 years of hems, alterations, wedding suits assembled from hope and limited budgets. Daniel pushed through the door Sunday afternoon, bells jangling. The shop's interior was a museum of fabric and threading. Mannequins wearing half-finished garments. Marco looked up from his work table, reading glasses perched on his nose. Daniel Frost. You only visit when you need something impossible. I need to look like I belong at a black tie gala. I have 68 hours. Marco set down his needle. Show me what you have. Daniel pulled out the garment bag. Inside was the suit from Marie's cousin's wedding 6 years ago, worn twice, stored carefully. Black, simple, off the rack. Marco examined it with the critical eye of a surgeon. You've lost weight. 15 pounds, maybe 20. The shoulders are wrong. The break at the ankle is too long. Marco tugged at the material. This is for Victor Hale's gala. It wasn't a question. Daniel nodded. My daughter works building services at Hale Tower. She mentioned something about a bet. Marco's expression didn't change. They're expecting you to look poor, uncomfortable, wrong. That's the general idea. So you want to prove them wrong? No. Daniel met his eyes. I want to prove them irrelevant. I'm not trying to become them. I'm showing up as myself, just the best version of that. Marco was quiet, then nodded slowly. Take off your coat. For the next hour, Marco worked with pins and chalk, marking adjustments. The shop was warm from the radiator, but outside, snow had started again, layering the windows with frost. The trick, Marco said around the pins in his mouth, is not to look like you're wearing someone else's clothes. This suit needs to be yours, not borrowed, not rented. Yours. He stepped back, studied Daniel. Stand straight, no straighter. These people, they'll read your posture before your clothes. Daniel adjusted his stance. Through the frosted window, he could see the street people hurrying through snow, the ordinary Sunday rhythm of a neighborhood where nobody went to galas. My daughter says Victor Hale is ruthless, Marco continued. Says he fired 3 people last month for minor mistakes. I've seen it. Then why go? Why subject yourself to that? Daniel thought about Lily, about her question. Because hiding teaches my daughter that some people are allowed to make you feel small. Showing up teaches her something else. Marco pinned the final adjustment, then helped Daniel out of the jacket. Come back Tuesday evening. I'll have it ready. Marco, I can't afford. We'll discuss payment after. Marco waved him off. Right now, focus on walking into that room like you own it. The suit is armor. You're the weapon. Daniel left as evening settled, streetlights flickering through falling snow. The neighborhood was transforming, cars becoming white mounds, sidewalks losing definition. He had 60 hours left. At home, Lily was at the kitchen table with construction paper and glitter, making a card. For luck, she explained. Mrs. Chen says important people need good luck charms. Daniel picked up the card. Crooked letters spelled, "Daddy is the best." A glitter star exploded across one corner. It's perfect, he said, and meant it. Tuesday evening arrived, dressed in snow and dark. Daniel stood in his apartment, checking his reflection. The suit fit like Marco had promised, not flashy, not expensive, but correct. The shoes were his father's, polished to a shine. The shirt was new, pressed with care. Lily sat on the couch, eyes solemn. She'd insisted on staying up past bedtime. You look like a prince, she said. I look like me, Daniel corrected, smiling. Just cleaner. The car arrived at 7:30, a black sedan arranged through a favor Robert had called in. The driver was professional, didn't comment on the neighborhood. You call when you're ready to leave, Robert said at the door. 3 minutes or 3 hours. You don't owe them anything. I know. Don't let them make you ashamed of who you are. The drive to the Northwind Grand Hotel took 40 minutes through snow-thick streets. Daniel watched the city transform, neighborhoods improving, buildings growing taller, restaurants changing from bodegas to bistros. The geography of money, the hotel appeared through snow like a palace, all light and glass. The red carpet stretched from the entrance, protected by an awning but still dusted with white. Photographers clustered near the entrance, flashes turning falling snow into bursts of diamonds. The car stopped. Sir? The driver's eyes in the rearview mirror. We're here. Daniel took a breath. Through the window, he could see other guests, women in furs, men in tuxedos that cost more than his monthly rent. They moved with ease, never questioning whether they belonged. He thought about turning around. Back to the apartment where Lily was probably already asleep. Back to safe. Back to small. Then he thought about Victor's voice. I give him 30 minutes before he realizes he doesn't belong. Daniel opened the door. The cold hit immediately. Snow was falling harder, catching in his hair. The red carpet stretched before him, leading to light and music and people about to lose a bet. He walked, one step, then another. Photographers turned, spotted him, then turned away, not famous enough. Standard procedure for the invisible. Except one photographer paused, raised his camera. Something in Daniel's walk, or the set of his shoulders. The flash went off once, twice. Another photographer noticed, followed suit. By the time Daniel reached the entrance, he had their attention. Not because he looked wealthy, but because he looked completely unbothered by the fact that he wasn't. Good evening, sir. The doorman opened the entrance. Good evening. Daniel stepped inside. The ballroom was a universe of crystal and light. Chandeliers dripped from the ceiling. Round tables filled the space, each centerpiece a garden of winter roses. A string quartet played in the corner. Servers moved through the crowd with champagne. And everywhere, the guests, hundreds of them, dressed in clothes that cost more than Daniel's car, laughing with the ease of people who never worried about rent. For exactly 3 seconds, Daniel stood frozen, overwhelmed. Then Victor Hale spotted him from across the room. The billionaire's expression cycled through surprise, disbelief, and something harder to name. He said something to Marcus beside him. They both stared. Daniel didn't look away. He walked into the ballroom like he owned it. The first hour was survival by navigation. Daniel stayed mobile, moving along the ballroom's perimeter, watching how others interacted. Conversations formed and dissolved like cells. Laughter came in carefully calibrated bursts. He accepted champagne from a server, barely sipped it. Studied the auction items displayed along one wall a week in Tuscany, courtside tickets, a painting that looked like thrown paint. The bids started at figures that made his stomach turn. First time at an Aurora Foundation event? A woman in her 50s approached, silver hair swept up, dressed the blue of deep water. That obvious? Daniel said. Only because you're actually looking at the auction items. Regulars stopped bothering years ago. She extended her hand. Catherine Reeves. I run the foundation. Daniel shook her hand. Daniel Frost. And what brings you to our little gathering, Mr. Frost? Here it was. The question that would categorize him. He could deflect, make something up. Instead, he told the truth. I work in operations coordination for a building management company. Victor Hale invited me. Catherine's eyebrow raised. Did he? How unusual. Tell me, what does operations coordination actually mean? So, Daniel told her. About supply chains and vendor management, about invisible infrastructure that kept buildings running. About the satisfaction of solving problems most people never noticed. He told her about the time a pipe burst on the 40th floor at 2 a.m, how he'd coordinated 3 contractor teams while rerouting the executive floor, all before sunrise. Told her about the elderly security guard who'd been falling asleep. How Daniel discovered the man worked double shifts for his wife's medication, how Daniel restructured the schedule and connected him with assistance programs. Catherine listened with genuine interest. That's remarkable. It's my job. No, Catherine gestured to the ballroom. Half the people here claim to change the world. Most just move money around. You actually solved problems that affected real people. That's remarkable. A man joined them, silver-haired, expensive suit. Catherine, are you monopolizing the interesting guest? Robert, meet Daniel Frost. He's the reason Hale Tower doesn't fall apart. Oversimplification, Daniel said, but shook the offered hand. Robert Chen. I chair the hospital foundation board. He studied Daniel with interest. You're not Victor's usual type, so I'm learning. The conversation expanded. Robert's wife joined, a cardiac surgeon. Then a city council member. Then a philanthropist. Daniel found himself in the center of a growing cluster, answering questions about his work, about managing complex systems with limited resources. He wasn't performing, wasn't trying to impress, just talked about what he knew, what he did, the problems he solved with creativity and stubbornness. And they listened. Across the ballroom, Victor Hale was watching. His expression had shifted from amusement to something more complicated. Marcus stood beside him, checking his phone, checking betting timestamps. Daniel realized. Daniel set down his champagne and continued talking. Dinner was announced at 9. Guests found their assigned seats. Daniel consulted his placement card table 12 near the back. Expected. He made his way through the crowd, aware of eyes following him now. Table 12 held 8 seats, already occupied. An older couple in matching watches, a woman in emerald silk who'd been surgically enhanced, and a younger man in a tuxedo. They looked up as Daniel arrived. You must be our wild card, the emerald woman said. I'm Vanessa Hartwick. This is my husband, Gregory, the Mitchells, and their son, Chase. Daniel shook hands, claimed his seat. The place settings were elaborate, multiple forks, glasses for different wines. He watched the others, matched their movements. So, Gregory said after the first course arrived, what's your story? Everyone here has a story. Daniel considered various answers, decided on truth. I work in building operations, have a daughter, live on the south side. Silence around the table, the kind that had weight. How? Refreshing, Vanessa said. The word landed like a diagnosis. And your wife? Is she here? I'm not married. Ah. Vanessa exchanged a look with her husband. How difficult that must be. Children need both parents, don't you think? Daniel's hand tightened on his fork. My daughter has everything she needs. Of course, I only meant that single parenthood is so challenging. Financial stress, limited time, developmental concerns. Chase, you did that study on childhood outcomes, didn't you? Chase, clearly uncomfortable, nodded reluctantly. It was about correlation, not causation. The statistics are quite clear, Vanessa continued. Children from single-parent households face significant disadvantages. Educational achievement, emotional stability. It's not judgment, simply facts. The table had gone quiet. At neighboring tables, conversations continued, but here everyone watched. Daniel set down his fork carefully. Those studies typically control for income, not family structure. I'm sorry? The disadvantages you're citing correlate with poverty, not single parenthood. Two-parent households where both parents work minimum wage show similar outcomes. The variable is resources, not number of parents. Daniel kept his voice level. My daughter attends a good school, has consistent routines, knows she's loved. By every metric that matters, she's thriving. Well, certainly you'd like to think so, Vanessa began. She reads at a 5th grade level. She's 7. She's learning piano from a neighbor. Participates in art. She has friends, makes her bed, says please and thank you. She's happy. Daniel met Vanessa's eyes. What metrics would you prefer? Gregory cleared his throat. Vanessa's point is simply that children benefit from advantages. And my point, Daniel said, still quiet, is that the greatest advantage I can give my daughter is showing her that people like you don't get to define her worth. The silence spread, rippling outward. Conversations faltered. People turned. Vanessa's face had gone hard. People like me? People who measure success by spending rather than caring. People who think poverty is moral failure rather than systematic problem. Daniel stopped, took a breath. Catherine Reeves appeared beside the table. Daniel, I wonder if you'd share that story about the security guard. An escape route, offered gracefully. Instead, Daniel stayed seated, looked around the table at faces that had already decided what he was. My daughter, he said quietly, thinks I'm important. That's the only opinion that matters to me. Vanessa recovered first, her smile returning like armor. How sweet. Children are wonderful at seeing the best in their parents, even when reality is more complicated. What complications did you have in mind? Daniel's voice stayed level. Well, surely you must worry. About providing for her. About her future opportunities. About, Vanessa gestured vaguely, exposing her to the right kind of people. The right kind of life. Gregory leaned forward. Vanessa's trying to help, in her way. We know a wonderful scholarship program for underprivileged children. Very selective, but with the right recommendation. My daughter isn't underprivileged, Daniel said. She has a father who shows up, who keeps his promises, who's teaching her that self-worth doesn't come from other people's approval. But surely you want more for her than Vanessa stopped, seeming to realize her sentence had nowhere to go that wouldn't sound cruel. Daniel finished it for her. Then what I have? Then a small apartment and a father who works for a living? You're right. I want her to have more. He paused, aware that neighboring tables had completely abandoned pretense of their own conversations. Phones were emerging from purses and pockets, screens glowing in the dimmed light. I want her to have the confidence that comes from being loved unconditionally, the resilience that comes from watching someone work hard without complaining, the empathy that comes from understanding not everyone starts with the same advantages. Those are lovely sentiments. Mrs. Mitchell spoke for the first time, her voice carrying the particular dismissiveness of old money. But sentiment doesn't pay for college. No, Daniel agreed. Hard work does. Scholarships do. Student loans do. The same way millions of people figure it out. But if you had the means, I don't. Daniel set down his napkin. The ballroom had gone almost completely silent now. Even the string quartet had finished their piece and not started another. I'm a single father who makes $48,000 a year. I live in a 3-room apartment with heat that barely works. I buy my daughter's clothes secondhand and her shoes on clearance. When she needs books for school, we go to the library. When she wants something special, she saves her allowance, $2 a week, for completing chores. He could feel Victor's stare from across the room. Could sense the shift in the crowd as people leaned in, recording, witnessing. I was invited here tonight as a joke, Daniel continued, his voice carrying in the strange acoustics of collective attention. There's a bet going about how long I'll last before I realize I don't belong. The over-under, I believe, is around dessert. He allowed himself a small smile. I hope someone bet on me staying. Catherine had moved closer, but she wasn't interfering. She was watching with sharp interest, recognizing something important happening. The truth is, I don't belong here. Not because I'm not good enough, but because I have nothing in common with most of you. You worry about which vacation home to visit. I worry about whether the car will start in winter. You're concerned about portfolio diversification. I'm concerned about the cost of school supplies. Daniel looked around the table, then out at the larger crowd. We live in different countries, occupying the same city. Then why come? Gregory's question was genuinely curious now, stripped of condescension. Because my daughter asked me if I was important, and I realized I've spent her entire life teaching her to be invisible, to not ask for too much, to accept that some spaces aren't for people like us. Daniel's throat was tight now, but he pushed through. I came here to prove that wrong. Not to you, to her. So one day when she's older and someone tells her she doesn't belong somewhere, she'll remember that her father walked into a room full of people who didn't want him there and held his head up anyway. The silence stretched. Hundreds of people, frozen in their seats or standing between tables, phones raised, all focused on the man in the simple suit who just laid his entire life open. Then, from somewhere near the back, someone started clapping. One person. Then another. Then a third. Not everyone, not even most. But enough that the sound grew, swelled, became something that couldn't be ignored. Catherine was smiling, eyes bright. Robert Chen had stood at his table, applauding slowly. The cardiac surgeon beside him joined. Then others scattered, uncertain, but real. Vanessa's face had gone white. Gregory was staring at his plate. The Mitchells looked like they wanted to sink through the floor. Daniel stood. Thank you for dinner. I should check on my daughter. He walked toward the exit. The applause continued, growing more confident. People he'd never met nodded as he passed. A few reached out to shake his hand. At the exit, Victor Hale stood waiting. Victor Hale looked smaller than he had in the conference room. Or perhaps Daniel had grown larger. They faced each other in the ballroom entrance, while snow fell beyond the windows, and the crowd behind them gradually returned to their dinners. That was quite a performance, Victor said. It wasn't a performance. No. Victor's jaw worked. I suppose it wasn't. They stood in silence. Through the glass doors, Daniel could see the red carpet, now buried under 3 inches of fresh snow. His ride home was a phone call away. He could leave now, walk out, having proven whatever needed proving. Instead, he waited. The bet, Victor said finally. You heard us. In the conference room. Every word. Victor flinched. And you came anyway. Because of it, not despite it. I don't understand. I know. Daniel studied the younger man, 29 years old, wealthier than Daniel could conceptualize, and somehow diminished by it. That's the problem. Catherine Reeves materialized beside them, her earlier warmth replaced by something sharper. "Victor, might I have a word?" "Catherine, not a request." She turned to Daniel. "Please wait. This concerns you." They moved a few feet away, but Catherine's voice carried. She'd meant it to. 5 years I've asked you to bring diversity to this event. 5 years you've given me excuses about how your networks are your networks, how these things take time. So imagine my confusion when I discover you've invited a guest for the express purpose of humiliating him. That's not. I've had 3 separate people inform me about a betting pool, about timestamps and payouts and whether Mr. Frost would cry. Catherine's words were surgical, precise. "Please tell me that's not true." Victor said nothing. "The Aurora Foundation," Catherine continued, "exists to support working families, to provide resources for people struggling to make ends meet, to acknowledge that systemic inequality exists and requires systemic solutions. And you've turned our gala into a circus where we mock the exact population we're supposed to be helping. I'll donate. I don't want your money. I want your resignation from the board." The words dropped like stones. Victor's face went pale. "You can't. I can. I will. The other board members will receive my recommendation tomorrow." Catherine's expression was iron. "Unless you'd prefer I simply make this public? I'm sure the people currently uploading videos of Daniel's speech would be interested in the full context." Victor looked between Catherine and Daniel, trapped. "I made a mistake." "You made a choice," Catherine corrected. "Repeatedly. In your office, with your friends, when you sent that invitation, this wasn't a momentary lapse. This was cruelty as entertainment." Marcus Webb appeared then, phone in hand, face ashen. "Victor, we have a problem. The videos are everywhere. Someone identified the betting pool. Your name is—" He stopped, seeing Catherine. "Oh God, Mr. Webb." Catherine's attention shifted. "You participated?" Marcus opened his mouth, closed it, nodded. "Then this applies to you as well. Both of you, off the board, effective immediately. The Foundation will issue a statement tomorrow apologizing to Mr. Frost and making clear that your behavior doesn't reflect our values." "Catherine, please." Victor started. "Please, what?" "Please keep quiet so you can continue pretending to care about inequality while treating poor people like performing animals." Catherine shook her head. "I've spent 30 years building this foundation. I won't let you destroy it because you've never had to see another person as fully human." She turned to Daniel. "On behalf of the Aurora Foundation, I apologize. Sincerely and completely. What happened tonight was unconscionable." Daniel looked at Victor, at the young man whose wealth had insulated him from consequences until this moment, whose privilege had never taught him that other people's pain was real. "I forgive you," Daniel said. Victor's head snapped up. "What?" "I forgive you, not because you deserve it, because I refuse to carry your cruelty home with me." Daniel adjusted his coat. "My daughter is waiting. She's going to ask me if the important people were nice. I'm going to tell her that some of them were, that some of them weren't, and that it didn't matter, because I didn't go there for them." He walked toward the exit. "Mr. Frost," Victor called after him. "Thank you for not making this worse." Daniel paused at the door. "Make it better. That's the only thanks I need." Outside, snow was falling harder, turning the city soft and quiet to 490 words. The car ride home was silent in the way that follows exhaustion. Daniel watched Chicago pass beyond the window, the hotel district giving way to residential, the geography running backward until South Racine Avenue appeared, streetlights turning falling snow into small galaxies. Inside apartment 4C, Robert was asleep in the chair. Daniel touched his shoulder gently. His father woke instantly. "You're back early." I said what I needed to say. Robert studied his son's face. "You okay?" "Yeah." Daniel was surprised to find it true. "I'm okay. Lily tried to wait up. Made it until 8:30. That's late for her." After Robert left, Daniel stood in the quiet apartment. Everything was exactly as it had been: the sagging couch, Lily's drawings on the refrigerator. The radiator clinked its familiar song. He looked in on Lily. She was sprawled across her bed, one arm flung over her stuffed elephant. The glitter card sat on her nightstand. Daddy is the best, surrounded by crooked stars. Daniel tucked the blanket around her. She stirred, eyes opening halfway. Daddy? Did you go to the castle? Something like that. Was it magic? He thought about the ballroom, the moment when he'd told the truth and watched it ripple outward. Yeah, sweetheart. It was magic. You're home now? I'm home. Good, she said, and was asleep before Daniel could respond. He changed out of the suit, hung it carefully. Tomorrow he'd return it to Marco. Tonight, he was just tired. At the kitchen window, Daniel looked out at the courtyard where Lily's snowman still stood, half buried in fresh accumulation. By morning, it would be unrecognizable, but for now, in the ambient glow of streetlights, he could still make out its raised stick arms, its smile of stones. His phone buzzed. A text from Catherine. The Foundation's board would like to offer you a position. Communications consultant. Call me tomorrow. Daniel read it twice. Set the phone down. He wasn't rich. The apartment was still too small. Tomorrow he'd still have bills to worry about, schedules to coordinate. But tonight, for the first time in years, Daniel felt visible. Not because strangers had applauded, not because he'd stood up to cruelty, but because he'd shown his daughter that walking through doors that weren't meant for you was possible. That dignity couldn't be given or taken, only claimed. He thought about Lily's question. Are you an important person? Now he had an answer. Important wasn't something others decided for you. It was something you decided for yourself, then proved through how you lived. Outside, snow continued its quiet work. Inside, Daniel slept without dreams.